It was a cold Tuesday evening in Atlanta, the kind that made people tuck their hands deep into their pockets and hunch their shoulders against the wind. The city streets were alive with the usual buzz, horns honking, laughter spilling out of restaurants, and the occasional siren wailing in the distance. At the heart of downtown stood Maison Royale, a high-end restaurant known for its elegant ambience, dim lighting, and menu filled with dishes that the average person couldn't even pronounce. It was the kind of place where waiters wore pressed suits, and guests arrived in black tie attire. And tonight, in the middle of all this luxury, Shaquille Big Shaq O'Neal walked in. He wasn't dressed like the other patrons. No tailored suits. No expensive watches flashing under the chandelier lights. Instead, he wore a simple gray hoodie, black sweatpants, and sneakers that looked well worn. A beanie covered his bald head, and he had the kind of relaxed posture that suggested he was just stopping by, maybe to grab a quick meal before heading home. Heads turned as he stepped inside, not because they recognized him, but because he didn't look like he belonged. The hostess at the front, a young woman with an upturned nose and a practiced smile, blinked at him, clearly trying to figure out whether he was lost. "Good evening, sir," she said, voice polite but distant. "Do you have a reservation?" Shaq smiled. "Nah, I just want to grab a bite." The hostess hesitated, then glanced around, as if expecting someone to step in and tell her what to do. She shifted on her heels, her eyes flickering to a tall woman standing near the bar, the head waitress, Lisa. Lisa was in her early 40s, sharp as a knife, with neatly tied-up hair and an attitude that made sure every server in that place walked in line. She had worked at Maison Royale for almost 15 years and took pride in maintaining a standard. And right now, her sharp eyes scanned Shaq from head to toe, lips pressing into a thin line. Then, without hesitation, she scoffed. "Ain't no way he's eating here," she muttered under her breath, shaking her head. She turned to the hostess. "Tell him there's no available seating." Shaq raised an eyebrow, hearing her clearly. The hostess hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. But Lisa was already moving toward him, arms folded. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, barely trying to sound apologetic. "We're fully booked tonight." Shaq gave a small laugh, tilting his head slightly. "Oh yeah?" "Yes," Lisa said, her voice firmer this time. She gestured toward the entrance. "I think you'll be more comfortable at Ray's Diner down the street. They serve burgers and fries, might be more your speed." A slow silence settled between them. For a moment, Shaq just stood there, staring at her. He wasn't the type to get easily offended, but something about the way she looked at him, as if he was beneath her, as if he didn't belong, lit a small fire in his chest. "I see," he murmured, rubbing his chin. Lisa sighed, already tired of the conversation. She turned to walk away, but Shaq's next words stopped her cold. "Guess I'll just have to eat at my own restaurant then." Lisa spun around, eyebrows pulling together in confusion. "Excuse me?" Shaq reached into his hoodie pocket, pulled out his Maison Royale black card, and held it up between two fingers. The gold-embossed logo shimmered under the restaurant's soft lighting. It took a second for Lisa to realize what she was looking at. A Maison Royale ownership card. Her stomach dropped. This man, the same one she had dismissed, insulted, and tried to push out the door, was the owner of the restaurant. The silence stretched, and suddenly, the noise of the restaurant, the clinking of glasses, the quiet laughter, the hum of conversations, felt too loud. Lisa swallowed hard. "Why you own this place?" Shaq nodded, slipping the card back into his pocket. "Yeah." He took a slow step forward, his deep voice dropping just a little lower. "And you? You work for me." Lisa's face turned pale. The hostess gasped, stepping away as if she didn't want to be caught in the crossfire. Nearby, other staff members, bartenders, servers, even the chefs in the open kitchen, were beginning to realize what was happening. Lisa struggled to find words, her usual sharpness completely gone. Shaq exhaled through his nose, then, after a moment, shook his head. "You know," he said, "I could have walked in here in a suit. Could have worn a Rolex. But I shouldn't have to." Lisa opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I've built businesses. Helped people. Given back to this city," Shaq continued. "And yet, you looked at me and decided I wasn't worth your time. Because of my clothes?" Lisa's eyes darted to the floor. Shaq studied her for a moment, then chuckled, shaking his head. "I ain't gonna fire you," he finally said. Lisa's eyes snapped up. "But I am gonna teach you a lesson." And with that, he turned and walked toward the VIP section, leaving Lisa standing there, shaken, speechless, and completely ashamed. Lisa stood frozen in place, her heart pounding so hard it felt like the walls of the restaurant could hear it. She swallowed, watching as Shaquille O'Neal, the man she had just insulted and dismissed, walked toward the VIP section like he owned the place. Because he did. The other staff had gone silent. Servers who had been bustling between tables paused. The bartender who had been mixing a martini froze mid-pour. The hostess, who had looked just as stunned as Lisa, was now biting her lip, avoiding eye contact. Lisa could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her, like a spotlight had been turned on, exposing her. She had messed up. Badly. She had spent years working at Maison Royale, taking pride in her ability to spot the important guests. The VIPs. The kind of people who walked in and deserved special treatment. She had built her own little system, a mental ranking of who belonged and who didn't. And today, that system had failed her. Because she had judged the one man she should have never judged. Her throat was dry. She needed water. She needed air. But more than anything, she needed to fix this. Fast. Lisa took a deep breath and hurried toward the VIP section, smoothing down her uniform, trying to compose herself. She had one chance to undo the damage before it got worse. Shaq had settled into a private booth, his massive frame almost too big for the plush seats. He stretched his legs, leaning back with an expression that was impossible to read, calm, collected, but with a hint of something else. Amusement? Disappointment? Lisa wasn't sure. As she approached the table, she plastered on her best professional smile, the one that had charmed countless difficult customers over the years. But somehow, tonight, it felt forced. "Mr. O'Neal," she began, her voice steady, practiced. "I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding earlier. Shaq raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Lisa, right?" Lisa blinked. "Why yes." He nodded, picking up the menu in front of him, flipping through it as if he hadn't just put her in the most humiliating situation of her career. "Tell me something," Shaq said, still looking at the menu. "You always treat people like that?" Lisa felt her stomach twist. "No, sir," she answered quickly. That was a mistake." Shaq finally looked up, tilting his head. "Yeah. What kind of mistake?" Lisa's mouth opened, but she had no answer. Because the truth was ugly. Too ugly to say out loud. That she had looked at him and assumed he was broke. That she had judged his hoodie and sweatpants, not knowing he could buy this entire restaurant chain 10 times over if he wanted to. She felt small. Shaq watched her struggle for words, then gave a slow chuckle. "It wasn't mean, just knowing. See, the thing is, he said, leaning forward, his massive hands folding on the table, I grew up with nothing. Wore the same shoes till they had holes in 'em. Ate what we could afford. Didn't have no fancy restaurants like this. Lisa nodded, not sure where this was going. Shaq smiled, but this time, there was a sharpness to it. And I never forgot how that felt. The words hit her harder than she expected. He let them sink in before he continued. Now, I'm sittin' here, in a place I own. And you been here 15 years, huh? Lisa nodded slowly. So, tell me, Shaq said, tapping the menu, how many times you done this before? Lisa's stomach twisted tighter. She wanted to say never. She wanted to pretend that this was the first time. But the truth? The truth was that she had done this before. Maybe not always so blatantly, but she had turned people away. Judged them by their appearance. Assumed that some people just didn't belong here. It had never backfired like this. Shaq sighed, shaking his head. That's the problem. People like you, workin' in places like this, get so used to kissin' up to folks in suits that you forget who really got the money. Lisa's face burned with shame. Let me ask you something, Shaq continued. What if I was just a regular guy? Some broke dude looking to have one nice meal after a long day. Would that make me less worthy of being here? Lisa felt hot tears prick at her eyes. She shook her head, voice barely above a whisper. No. Shaq studied her for a moment, then exhaled. Good, he said, leaning back. Now, let's see if you can fix this. Lisa nodded quickly. I'll personally take care of your meal tonight, sir, she said, trying to salvage what little was left of her dignity. Anything you'd like, on the house. Shaq let out a deep laugh. Oh no, I'm payin', he said, shaking his head. With a big tip too. Lisa blinked. You still wanna pay? Shaq raised an eyebrow. What? You thought I was gonna storm out, call up corporate, have you fired? He smirked. Nah. That'd be too easy. Lisa swallowed. I'd rather you remember this, Shaq continued. Every time someone walks through that door, I want you to think back to tonight. He leaned in just a little. Because you never know who you're talking to. Lisa felt that lesson settle deep in her bones. She had spent years thinking she was an expert at judging people. But tonight, the tables had turned, and she had been the one completely blind. She nodded. Understood. Shaq grinned. Good. Now go on, get me something good to eat. And hey, he glanced around the restaurant. Make sure the kitchen knows who they're cooking for. Lisa gave a small, humble nod before hurrying off toward the kitchen. Tonight, she had learned the biggest lesson of her career. And she would never forget it. Lisa moved through the restaurant with a weight in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Every step toward the kitchen felt heavy, as if she was carrying the burden of her own ignorance. She had prided herself on being the best at her job, sharp, efficient, no nonsense. But tonight, she had learned a painful truth about herself. She had judged a man not by his character, not by his presence, not even by the way he carried himself, but by his clothes. And that man turned out to be Shaquille O'Neal, the owner of the restaurant. The realization still made her skin prickle with embarrassment. But there was no time to drown in self-pity. Lisa squared her shoulders as she stepped into the kitchen. Chef, she called out, keeping her voice steady, we need a VIP meal. The head chef, a burly man with a thick southern accent named Marco, wiped his hands on his apron and turned. VIP? Who we cookin' for? Lisa hesitated for half a second, then said, "Mr. O'Neill." Marco blinked. Then his eyebrows shot up so fast, Lisa thought they might disappear into his hairline. "Big Shaq?" he asked, voice rising. Lisa nodded. Wait, Shaquille O'Neal is here." Marco nearly dropped the pan in his hand. Lisa didn't answer, just pressed her lips together. Marco whistled low, shaking his head. "Damn. And I assume we need to go all out." Lisa exhaled. "Yes. I want the best we got." The chef smirked. "Say less." He clapped his hands together, turning to his team. "All right, listen up. We got a special meal to prep. I want everything perfect." The kitchen sprang into action. Lisa lingered for a moment, watching the chefs move with purpose. Then, without a word, she turned and headed back out, her stomach still tangled in knots. This was her chance to make it right. As Lisa approached Shaq's table again, she noticed something that made her pause. He wasn't scrolling through his phone. He wasn't checking his watch. He wasn't looking around impatiently like some impatient celebrity. Instead, Shaq was watching the restaurant. He was observing the waiters, the bartenders, the couples on dates, the old man at the bar sipping a whiskey alone. It was like he was taking it all in, not as a customer, but as a man who truly cared. Lisa cleared her throat. "Mr. O'Neill, your meal is being prepared. It should be ready shortly." Shaq glanced up at her and smiled. "Good. I'm hungry." Lisa hesitated, then slowly pulled out the chair across from him. "May I?" Shaq raised an eyebrow. "Please," she added quickly. "Just for a minute." Shaq considered it, then nodded. "Go ahead." Lisa sat down, clasping her hands together on the table. "I want to apologize again," she said, her voice softer than before. "Not just because you own this place, but because I was wrong." Shaq tilted his head slightly, waiting. Lisa sighed. "I've been in this industry for years. And in those years, I've learned to spot people, their status, their money." She shook her head. "I thought I was good at it. But tonight, I learned I've been looking at it all wrong." Shaq leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You want to know a secret?" Lisa blinked. "What?" Shaq chuckled. "The richest people ain't always the ones who look rich." Lisa's chest tightened. "I got friends who dress in $1,000 suits every day, but they live paycheck to paycheck. Always trying to prove something," Shaq said, his voice calm. "Then I got people, real money people, who walk around in jeans and sneakers, no fancy watches, no flash. Because they don't need to prove nothing. Lisa's lips parted slightly, taking in his words. Shaq leaned back, drumming his fingers against the table. "You looked at me and saw a broke man. You saw a hoodie and thought, not my kind of customer." Lisa's stomach twisted. Shaq gave her a knowing smile. "But what you didn't see, what you couldn't see, was everything that came before that hoodie." Lisa swallowed. "What do you mean?" Shaq spread his hands. "You didn't see the young kid sleeping on a thin mattress in a tiny apartment. You didn't see the high school kid who had to fight every day to stay out of trouble. You didn't see the man who worked his ass off to become something. To build something." Lisa felt something shift inside her. Shaq continued, his voice gentle but firm. "You saw the hoodie. But you didn't see the man inside it." Lisa exhaled sharply. She had never thought about it like that. She had never once considered what people carried beneath their clothes, beyond what she could see. Shaq smirked. You know what my mama used to say? Lisa shook her head. A king in rags is still a king. Lisa blinked, processing that. A king in rags is still a king. She had spent so long believing status was about appearance, that she had completely ignored the fact that true wealth is deeper than fabric and labels. Lisa sighed. I guess I've got a lot to unlearn. Shaq chuckled. Don't we all? She smiled, a real, genuine smile, for the first time that night. A few minutes later, the kitchen doors swung open, and Marco himself emerged, carrying Shaq's meal like it was a work of art. Mr. O'Neill, Marco grinned, setting the plate down. A little something special from the best kitchen in Atlanta. Shaq looked at the plate, a perfectly seared steak, buttery mashed potatoes, and a side of truffle asparagus. Lisa waited, holding her breath. Shaq picked up his fork, cut a piece, and took a bite. For a second, there was silence. Then, Shaq nodded slowly. Damn, he muttered. That's good. Marco exhaled in relief. Glad you like it, boss. Shaq grinned. Keep feeding me like this, and I might just give y'all a raise. Marco laughed, and the tension that had been hanging in the air all night finally broke. Lisa felt her shoulders relax. Maybe, just maybe, she could redeem herself. Shaq looked up at her one last time before taking another bite. Lisa, he said. Yes, she asked, standing a little straighter. You're gonna be all right, Shaq said simply. Just, try to do better next time. Lisa nodded firmly. I will. And for the first time that night, she truly meant it. Lisa woke up the next morning with a heaviness in her chest. She had tossed and turned all night, replaying the events at Maison Royale in her mind. Shaquille O'Neal. A man she had insulted, dismissed, judged unfairly. The man who owned the restaurant. The shame was still there, sitting deep in her gut. But alongside it, there was something else. A realization. She had spent 15 years believing she knew exactly how to read people. 15 years thinking that the rich wore their wealth like armor. And in a single night, Shaq had shattered that belief like glass. A king in rags is still a king. The words haunted her. She had spent her career dismissing people who didn't look the part. How many times had she turned away someone who was just trying to enjoy a meal? How many faces had she written off just because they weren't wrapped in designer labels? She didn't have the answer. But she knew one thing. She didn't want to be that person anymore. Lisa arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual. She walked in through the back entrance, passing the line cooks, the dishwashers, the people who made the restaurant run. For the first time, she saw them differently. She spotted Miguel, the dishwasher who never spoke much but worked tirelessly every night. He wore the same sneakers he had owned for years, scuffed, old, but still holding up. She had never thought much about that before. Had she ever even asked if he was okay? If he needed anything? Then there was Sarah, the single mother who worked double shifts as a server. Lisa had always respected her hustle, but last night had made her realize, had she ever gone out of her way to really help her? She had been so focused on the appearances of customers, she had ignored the people who worked beside her every day. That stung. Lisa made her way to the main floor, taking a deep breath before stepping out into the dining area. She wasn't the same person she had been yesterday. And today, she was going to prove it. As the evening crowd trickled in, Lisa stood by the front, watching closely. A man in a tailored Armani suit walked in with a date, and the hostess rushed to seat them. Lisa had spent years catering to men like him. They were easy. Predictable. But tonight, her eyes drifted past them. Toward the quiet woman in a simple blue dress, standing near the entrance, hesitating. Her dress wasn't expensive. Her shoes were modest. But there was something in her eyes, uncertainty. Lisa stepped forward. "Good evening, ma'am," she said, her voice warm. "Welcome to Maison Royale. Do you have a reservation?" The woman flushed slightly, gripping the strap of her purse. "Oh, no. I wasn't sure if." Lisa smiled gently. "We'd love to have you. Right this way." The woman's face lit up in surprise. "Oh. Really?" Lisa nodded. "Of course. Every guest is important here." The words felt right as they left her lips. She led the woman to a cozy table near the window, pulled out the chair for her, and placed a menu in front of her. "If you need any recommendations, just let me know," Lisa said. The woman smiled, relaxing. "Thank you so much." Lisa felt something shift in her chest. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was actually doing her job, not just seating people, but welcoming them. All of them. Lisa had just finished helping another guest when the doors swung open again. And there he was. Shaquille O'Neal. This time, he wasn't alone. He walked in with a group, some dressed in sharp suits, others in casual hoodies and sneakers. But Lisa didn't hesitate this time. She stepped forward, standing tall. "Mr. O'Neal," she greeted with a respectful nod. Shaq grinned. "Lisa." He studied her for a moment, as if trying to read her. And maybe, just maybe, he saw what had changed. "No problems tonight," he teased. Lisa smiled, a real, genuine one. "Not at all. We have your table ready." Shaq chuckled. "I like the sound of that." Lisa led him and his guests to the VIP section. As she set down the menus, Shaq looked up at her, amusement in his deep voice. "You different today." Lisa met his gaze, her shoulders steady. "Because I learned something important last night." Shaq nodded slowly. "That so?" Lisa took a deep breath. "I learned that real wealth doesn't always wear a suit. And that every person who walks through these doors deserves respect." Shaq's expression softened, and a knowing smile spread across his face. "Now that's what I like to hear." Lisa smiled. She wasn't just saying it to impress him. She meant it. As Shaq and his friends laughed over dinner, Lisa stepped away, watching the restaurant hum with life. She felt lighter. Not because she had avoided getting fired. Not because she had saved face. But because she had truly changed. And in the end, that was worth more than any tip, any paycheck, any promotion. She had been given a lesson. A lesson in humility. A lesson in judgment. A lesson in what true wealth really looked like. And she would never forget it. Lisa had worked at Maison Royale for 15 years. She had seen wealthy businessmen spend thousands on a single meal. She had catered to celebrities, politicians, and CEOs. She had polished her ability to spot money before it even spoke. But never in her career had she experienced a shift as profound as the one Shaquille O'Neal had forced her to confront. And now, standing at the restaurant's entrance, watching every guest with new eyes, she knew. She would never go back to the way she was before. She couldn't. As the night went on, Lisa found herself treating every guest differently. Not by status. Not by wealth. But by respect. She checked on the elderly man sitting alone at the bar, making sure his whiskey was poured exactly how he liked it. She took a moment to ask Miguel, the dishwasher, if he needed anything before his shift ended. She even pulled Sarah, the single mother server, aside and said, "If you ever need extra support, let me know." And for the first time in a long time, Lisa felt something new at work. Something that had nothing to do with fine dining or five-star service. She felt proud. Not of the restaurant. Not of her job title. But of the person she was becoming. Lisa was making her rounds when she noticed Shaq waving her over. She approached the table, standing with the same calm confidence she had shown earlier. "Everything to your liking, Mr. O'Neill?" she asked smoothly. Shaq grinned. "Oh yeah. Food's on point, service is solid." He leaned back in his seat. "But that ain't why I called you over." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Oh." Shaq tilted his head slightly. "I see you tonight, Lisa." Lisa blinked, unsure of what he meant. Shaq gestured subtly around the restaurant. "You ain't just going through the motions. You seein' people now. You feel that difference?" Lisa hesitated, then slowly nodded. "I do." Shaq chuckled. "Told you it wasn't about clothes." Lisa let out a small laugh. "You were right." Shaq's expression turned more serious. "You know, I could have fired you last night." Lisa stiffened. She had known that from the moment he pulled out his ownership card. She had prepared herself for it. But he hadn't fired her. Instead, he had taught her. Lisa met his gaze. "And I wouldn't have blamed you if you did." Shaq nodded slowly, as if acknowledging the honesty in her words. Then, after a beat, he said something that made her stomach drop. "I want to promote you." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. I'm sorry." Shaq smirked. "I think you heard me." Lisa stared at him, trying to process his words. "Promote her? After everything?" Shaq leaned forward, folding his hands together. "See, last night wasn't about whether you were good at your job. You got experience. You run a tight ship. But what you didn't have before was the right perspective." Lisa swallowed hard. "But now?" Shaq shrugged. "You get it. And I need people in leadership who get it." Lisa could hardly believe what she was hearing. After years of working her way up, thinking promotions only came through experience and perfection, she was now being offered one because she had changed. Because she had learned. Shaq leaned back, watching her reaction. "So, what do you say?" Lisa took a slow breath. The old Lisa, the one from 2 nights ago, might have accepted immediately, eager to climb the ranks and prove herself. But the Lisa sitting here now? She knew this was bigger than a title. "I say," Lisa began, choosing her words carefully, "that if I take this promotion, I want to use it to make sure that no one who walks into this restaurant ever feels the way I made you feel." Shaq's smile widened. "Now that," he said, "is the right answer." A week later, Lisa's promotion was made official. She was now the guest relations manager at Maison Royale. Her first order of business. She implemented a new staff policy, one that ensured every guest was treated with the same level of respect, no matter what they wore, what car they drove, or how much money they had in their pockets. She held meetings with the servers, reminding them that hospitality was about more than fancy dining, it was about people. And most importantly, she never made the same mistake again. Not because she feared another wealthy guest in disguise. But because she now understood that true wealth has nothing to do with appearances. One evening, months later, a man in a simple hoodie and jeans walked into the restaurant. Lisa spotted him immediately. He looked around, hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he belonged. And in that moment, Lisa knew. The old her would have dismissed him. But tonight? She walked straight up to him, smiled, and said, "Welcome to Maison Royale. We're honored to have you." Because now, she understood. A king in rags is still a king.